Hello, everybody. I'm attorney Aiden Kramer with the law office of Aiden Kramer in Colorado, and this is all up in your business. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, avoiding the risks of the single member LLC? I think I've already seen this video. Well, that's right. My most popular video is called Avoiding the Risks of the Single Member LLC. It's substantially more popular than any of my other videos and has a lot more views than any of the other ones, which is fantastic, except for the fact that I hate that video. I filmed it a really long time ago. It was actually one of the first videos that I ever did, and it was way back when, before I had any good equipment, before I learned how to edit videos, and before I learned how to angle cameras so I didn't have 15 chins. I hate that darn video and I wish it would go away. So the purpose of this video is 100% for my own vanity. I'm going to redo it and hopefully eventually phase out that old video and delete it, and then we can all forget that it ever happened. So if you've already watched that old video, I encourage you to still watch this one because I'm going to be talking about the same things but in a little different style, and I want you to watch this one and forget about that old one, okay? All right. Let's talk about avoiding the risks of the single member LLC. So in an LLC, the owners of the LLC are called members. So a single member LLC is an LLC that only has one member. The primary purpose of forming an LLC for your business is that an LLC provides limited liability protection. So with an LLC, the idea is that all of the assets of the business owner, of the member, would be protected from any of the liabilities of the business. So if the business is sued or the business has debts, the owner's personal assets are protected and shouldn't be liable for any of those liabilities. That's the way that it's supposed to work, but there are instances where a court or a judge would decide to pierce the corporate veil and still make the owner personally liable for the business's liabilities and debts. That is called piercing the corporate veil, and it essentially means that this veil of liability protection gets pierced and the person, the owner, is now personally responsible for business debts. And there is a higher risk of piercing the corporate veil with a single member LLC because there's just less separation between the member, the business owner, and the LLC in a single member LLC than there typically is in a multi-member LLC. That you don't have those checks and balances that come along with working with other owners, and you might feel like you have more freedom to do whatever you want because you're the only owner and you're not really accountable to anybody else. Most courts are more hesitant to pierce the corporate veil in a multi-member LLC because they don't want to readily make all of the members personally liable for something that maybe only one of the members was responsible for in the business. So that's why it's a little easier sometimes for courts to pierce the corporate veil in a single member LLC. But luckily for all of us single member LLCs, there are things you can do to limit that risk and hopefully keep up the liability protection of your LLC. The first thing you can do is to make sure you follow legal formalities. Pretend you're in a multi-member LLC and do all the things that a multi-member LLC would do. That includes having an operating agreement for your LLC. If you had business partners, you guys would have a partnership agreement in an LLC that's called an operating agreement. So just because you're by yourself doesn't mean you get out of having to have an operating agreement for your LLC. Other formalities such as organizational documents and organizational resolution, those are important as well. Making sure you keep adequate records of transactions and things that your business does. Having those records helps to uphold the liability protection in a single member LLC. Another important corporate formality that you would do in a multi-member LLC is to hold meetings and have meeting minutes that document what you talked about during that meeting, decisions that were made, actions that you decided to take. All of those things would normally be held in a multi-member LLC. So you need to still do them in a single member LLC. Even though you're the only owner, it might seem weird to have a meeting with yourself, but that's exactly what you need to do. Have a meeting with yourself, document decisions that you've made by yourself. Stay tuned for after this video. I recently had a member meeting with myself and I recorded it, and I'm gonna put it at the end of this video so you guys can see what that meeting looks like in a single member LLC. Another important thing to do to avoid piercing the corporate veil and avoid those risks in a single member LLC is to keep your LLC adequately capitalized. You can't underfund your LLC in an effort to avoid liability. If you take all of the money out of the LLC and figure if somebody sues me, there's nothing in the business for them to get anyway, you can't do that. You have to have adequate capitalization, enough money in the business to keep the business running, to pay overhead and all of those things. I've made another video in the past of talking more about adequate capitalization, so you can check back to that if you have more questions about that. The next thing that's important to do, and really, really important to do in a single member LLC, is to avoid co-mingling funds. This is so important. I cannot say it enough. You need to have separate bank accounts, separate accounting and banking records for your business and for your personal expenses. You cannot keep them all in one bank account. You can't pay your personal bills directly from your business's account, and vice versa. You can't pay your business's bills directly from your personal account either. Everything needs to be kept separate. And finally, one of the last things that's important to do to avoid the risks of a single member LLC is to be sure that you're always acting in your capacity as the member of the LLC. So if you're signing a contract, signing an agreement, you need to make sure you're signing on behalf of the LLC and not as yourself personally. So here we've got an important contract, similar to one that you might sign as a business owner. On the top, it says very clearly that this contract is being signed by Aiden LLC and Supplier LLC, not being signed by Aiden Kramer as a human or Supplier as a human. It's the two businesses that are entering into this contract. And then down at the bottom, after all of the important terms and conditions of the contract, we have the signatures. Aiden LLC is the one signing the contract. I, as the owner, am signing on behalf of the LLC. So if you're signing anything for your business, be sure you're signing it in your capacity as the owner, the member, the president, whatever you want to call yourself, of the LLC, and not just sticking your name on there as a human being, because then you as a human are signing it, and it's you as a human who is liable for the terms of that contract. All right, well, I hope this video was a little bit better than the previous one about avoiding the risks of the single member LLC. I hope it gets a little more popular than that other one so we can all forget that it ever happened. If you guys have any questions about the risks of a single member LLC, feel free to comment them. If you're in Colorado and you want to talk to me about your single member LLC or your multi-member LLC or forming one, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help and provide guidance wherever I can. Be sure to stay tuned after the credits for that footage of me having a meeting with myself. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Aiden Kramer, and I'll see you next time. Hi Aiden, thank you so much for being here today to attend this member meeting for Aiden LLC. Well, hello Aiden, it's a pleasure being here today. Thank you so much for arranging this meeting. So one thing I've been thinking about doing with the LLC is moving to a new office. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but I think it's an important step for the business. I think that's a great idea. I consent. I'm also thinking about taking out a business loan so I can purchase a big piece of important equipment that's really important for the business. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I consent to that as well. All right, perfect. Well, since we both consent to everything, I'll make note of that in our meeting minutes. We can both sign to show our consent, and then we'll be good to take those actions, and we'll have adequate written records of everything we've done and that we've agreed to do them. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Has anyone ever told you that you've got great hair and expert camera angles? Oh, please. You embarrass me. All right, maybe that was kind of stupid. Bye, everybody. Please don't stop watching. Bye.